Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, your go-to source for all the latest industry trends, strategies to help you level up your M&A practice. I am your host, Nick Olsen, Managing Director of Cornerstone International Alliance, a group of lower middle market M&A firms. Here we bring in masterminds who are experienced, knowledgeable, and gracious enough to share how they have succeeded in the world of M&A. Today's guest I'm really excited about, and the topic we're going to discuss. He is my second consecutive guest from the great country of Canada. He earned his master's degree in business from Lancaster University Management School in the United Kingdom. He is a world traveler, having visited over 30 countries, and I would assume, and counting. He does a lot of volunteer work in his community of Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, Canada. He is very active. You can typically find him at a CrossFit box where he is getting his lift on. He enjoys camping with his family and is an active member of Cornerstone International Alliance. Please welcome my guest today, Jeff MacKenzie. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me on, Nick. Appreciate it.
You still doing CrossFit?
A little bit these days. I have 3 kids at home now who are doing everything they can to keep me out of it, keep me occupied, but still trying to make it there.
And congratulations to you and your wife on your third baby recently. So I'm sure that it doesn't help your gym time.
Yeah, thank you, Nick. Yeah, we just welcomed another one a couple of weeks ago, so I'm still in the. If you notice some bags or anything under my eyes, it's just a little sleep deprived these days, but we're getting through it. It's all good. Yeah.
Well, today's topic I'm really excited about, and with Cornerstone International Alliance being a group of firms, who are cross borders, it's always a topic of conversation. How we can work together collaboratively, and sometimes whether it's a barrier or it's an opportunity, doing an M&A deal across country borders is not always the easiest thing to do. And we're here to talk about a deal that you had led recently for Confederation M&A that ended up being a cross-border deal. I don't know that it was in the initial plans, which we'll dive into in a little bit. You inevitably closed a deal cross-border. Was that your first and only, or have you done more?
No, so it was our first and only. And to answer your point there, it really wasn't in the plans. We weren't actively prospecting, sell-side clients in Europe. This one kind of just fell on our lap, and I say fell on our lap, but it was really through relationships and referrals built up over time how it came about. But yeah, it was our first.
Okay. Well, let's dive in. Why don't you set the stage for us? As much information as you can talk about. I know there's a lot of confidentiality that we always work under, and so talk about this opportunity that you came across. How did you prospect the client? Industry. All that sort of fun stuff that go into getting a client up and running on a deal.
Yeah, we first when I said it fell in our lap, maybe not the most accurate way to describe it, because it was really one of the questions I got asked most often on this transaction was just that point. It's how does a Canadian M&A firm wind up working with a company over in Europe, and why are you guys working with them? So. First of all, although the company was headquartered in Europe, they had really strong North American presence. So there was that connection that they have, offices and doing lots of work in Canada and the United States. So there was that connection. But really, the quick story summarized on how this came about to us in the first place is we have, it's all through relationships, referrals, like a lot of the business, but we have a longstanding good relationship with a consultant here in Atlantic, Canada, where we're based, and they focus a lot of their time in the equipment manufacturing space and have done tons of work between North America and Europe over the years. And going back about 15 years ago, when our clients started their business, they met this client, through their consulting work, and saw that they had a really great product and technology that wasn't yet in North America. And in working with some of their clients in North America, they saw a great opportunity to introduce that technology. And so in the early days of this company, which is based in Austria, getting going, our relationship with this consultant, the work he was doing, he really helped them get off the ground in North America and help them grow their business here. So, fast forward 15 years later, they've kept a good relationship with clients in Austria, and they got talking about, I think the time has come in their corporate history to they were looking for a growth partner. So this wasn't a retirement play. It was really looking for a strategic investor to come in, lend some capital resources and help really take them to the next level. They were more or less in a conversation about, what options should we consider when we're looking for a partner. And that's when our name sort of got dropped in the hat that, the consultant, his name's Chris, said, there's an M&A company in Atlantic, Canada, I know located far away from you guys, but that does work in this space. Why don't you have a conversation with them and talk to them about how that process looks and how the journey goes? And I remember when they first made the referral to us, my first reaction was almost to discount it as a possible engagement, just because most of our work is here in North America, as you know, and not every day that opportunities, on the other side of the pond come up. So we yeah, great. We'll meet with them. And, I'd say very early kind of hit it off with the clients, just in terms of, we really liked them. They seemed to like us. We went over and met with them, really hit it off in person. We were just we also knew we were just one of a few companies or more being considered as their advisors. So we're really, I would say, in an underdog position that we wanted our name to be in the hat and be in the mix, but maybe didn't expect that, just speaking honestly, that they might be going with a North American firm, because on the surface, there's a lot of reasons why a European M&A firm may make more sense to advise. Mm-hmm. So anyway, long story short, we were very pleased that they did want to go with us. I think they felt good chemistry, and trust factor was there. There was, I think, the referral. This is kind of the power of referrals too, that the fact that somebody with a 15-year history and a trusting relationship was able to kind of go to bat for us and say, listen, we've done work with this organization before. They'll do everything they can to represent you in your best interests. I think that carried a ton of weight and really gave us that edge to get the engagement. So yeah, that was back in I guess early 2022, kicking off about 2 years ago when that first got rolling.
Jeff, you hit on it, and I want to kind of go backwards just quickly on, because you guys gaining a client in Austria doesn't seem like a common practice, right? I mean, like I said, it's your first and one and only at this point. But hit on, and we talk a lot on this podcast show about referral sources, and those being, very important. And obviously this is a very, telltale sign as to how referral sources can bring you business. And that's how you guys got this client.
Yeah, 100%. I would say nowadays, referrals either through past business owners that we worked with or through professional advisors, which it was in this case. It was a, consultant who had done work with, who became our client, are important. And I think that maybe a lesson there is you have to be patient in this game, because this was a relationship that the seeds were planted 15 years ago. And, just as the business was getting going, really, and it wasn't until 15 years later that the business had reached a point in their growth trajectory that they were looking to turn the chapter and bring on an investor. So you never know when some of those relationships will end up paying off and coming back around. But really, yeah, it's reinforces the importance of referrals for sure.
I appreciate you explaining the process, how that came to be. But from your perspective, what was going through your head, thinking like, okay, now I got to lead this deal that's based in Austria. I'm here in Canada. What's going through your mind at that point?
Yeah. To be honest, I was concerned about it, and maybe even a little bit skeptical about how we were going to pull that off, because aside from, I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit later, but aside from some regulatory and technical differences and, how deals flow and structured, yes, there's a lot of similarities, but there are some differences, which it was a bit of a, you don't know what you don't know until you got into it. But there was also some really practical challenges, I would say, of, although I'm on the east coast of Canada, so I'm closer to Europe, I'm still 5 hours off from our clients. So there's the time zone challenges. Although everybody's, for the most part speaks English or multiple languages, the main, day-to-day language is German. I don't speak German. So there was that. And then with the distance and the travel time is, although, yes, you can do a lot of virtual work these days and hop on, calls like we're on today, there's still the power of that in-person connection on files, especially, the work we do. You're dealing with somebody at probably the most important transaction of their life and, wanting some face-to-face time. So it did include some travel overseas, included many calls at awkward times of the day where you might be waking up in the morning and hopping on a Zoom call and then going back to bed, or, trying to manage that schedule. And from the language issue, it's, although all their dealings with customers would primarily be in English because they were dealing on a global basis, and that was sort of the universal business language, all of their internal documents. So we're talking German financial statements and German employment contracts, and most of the type of due diligence information you get, I was getting German documents. So I had to really rely on translation services, and Google app, saved my life on this transaction. Just being able to take pictures of documents and have them translated would help me. But everything took longer because of that, just to have to translate and read and understand some of the differences there. So there was some real practical challenges, and so a bit of hesitation, I guess, to answer your question of jumping into it, just about how that whole thing would unfold.
But I would imagine, something that you were really excited about, at the same time, because, not having done it, now you can say we've done one, have that experience and probably learn from all the things that happen, good, bad, or indifferent, on the next opportunity you get, maybe from the same referral source or in another country. So I got to imagine you're very excited at the same time.
Yeah, big time. Now that it's finished, it was, looking back, it was, one of the most fun, if not the most fun on a transaction I've had. Really helped that I really liked the clients, just as people, and, you work with them so long for a couple of years that, you become friends with them too through the transaction. And so it was a great experience, good learning experience. We're not actively prospecting in the region still, but it also shows you what a small world this is when we set out in this transaction and we're thinking, who's gonna be the right fit as a investor buyer in this company. We're talking to companies in Asia and Australia and Europe and North America and South America. So you really, you realize what a small world it is in this space. And I think part of the buyers and feeling comfortable with us appreciated that, and that, this buyer could be from anywhere. It's unlikely to be in our backyard, actually, for this transaction. They're doing work all over the world. So for them, the importance of having an advisor geographically right next to them just wasn't as important as having somebody that they trusted and were comfortable with. So it worked in our favor on this one. Yeah.
And tell me, you guys being a member of Cornerstone International Alliance, how did maybe that help you in this international deal that spanned across multiple countries, whether it be the ultimate buyer or all the prospecting you did on what buyers might look like?
Yeah, definitely. And I won't just say this because I'm talking to you, Nick, but it definitely helped back in the early stages of pitching to them. And I for sure incorporated Cornerstone International into my pitch deck and talked to them about, if we were just a standalone M&A firm without sort of the power of being part of a larger group, would we still have had this opportunity? I'm not sure. I think that definitely played in well to, and it's the truth of the alliance. The fact that we can have access to, 30 odd firms who are like us across the world. So if I do run into issues in Europe, for example, about how, certain deal structure nuances that we may not be as used to, I can bounce that off of some CIA partners. And there was questions like that would come up along the way that I would bounce off somebody else who may have been experienced, whether it was in the geographical area or whether it was on a deal in this industry. there's always, as you would know, Nick, there's lots of conversations happening daily basis, best practices and helping each other out. So that was, that was definitely a good sort of arrow in our quiver to be able to talk about CIA.
Yeah. And you mentioned in that industry, why don't you, talk a little bit about, your client, what industry were they in, what kind of buyer were they looking for, and what were they maybe trying to get out of this transaction?
Yeah. So I mentioned it wasn't a retirement play. So from the start, it was always about growth and, finding a partner that can really help bring them to the next level. So the industry they were in was manufacturing, very technically advanced equipment for the food industry. So think like inspection technology, machinery that can you'd put it in a processing line for a food product to go through and detect foreign materials, whether a product, do quality control on products. So it was, they were really at the point where they saw benefit in being part of a group that could maybe help them grow more of a global distribution network, sales network, bolster up their team, be a part of something bigger, that sort of mindset. So the options we were evaluating in a buyer profile that kind of made sense was somebody who, could be a strategic buyer, somebody who is doing, a similar type of complementary product to what they're doing, to become part of something else, or a financial type of buyer that really want to lend some more horsepower. And what we ultimately found in a buyer was really a hybrid sort of between the two. It's a financially backed buyer that was growing a strategic portfolio in the space. So very interested in the technology and interested in the space they were in food processing, but backed by a private equity type of buyer. That was sort of the profile we set out for, and what we found, I would say, twice, because we kind of had to do the deal twice, as we talked about before we logged on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I guess tell us about the first buyer. How did that come to fruition, and then how did inevitably, I guess, the deal not happen?
Yeah. So I'll give a bit of context to open it up, I guess, because we were talking about it before we started, Nick, but we started the process in early 2022, so going back a couple of years ago. And I would say, if you would look at it outside looking in, it was textbook M&A process, a very smooth deal. We had a great list of options and candidates we were looking at, identified a really good candidate that we liked. I won't make it too specific, but North American buyer with some global activities. Went down the road with them and got very, very far down the road, even having purchase and sale agreements negotiated and everything going very well, until I would say, probably 8 months, 9 months into the process. Now that's not that long of a due diligence process, but if you factor in the time from when we started, got all our ducks in a row, went out to market and found a buyer, and then went through due diligence, everything pretty much finished. And I really would say it was 11th hour. We were very near the finish line, and I would have given this transaction a 95% plus chance of closing in late 2022. I still remember it was mid-September, got a call from the buyer group we were working with, and they essentially told me that they had a board meeting recently, and we're going to hit pause on this. And totally caught me off guard. It was just like, did not see it coming at all, and came to learn that it was really nothing to do with the company itself that spooked them or that gave them any issues. Due diligence was all good and clean, and probably cleaner than most that I'm on, and no skeletons in the closet. Everything was good, and it was really probably the first time that I had that happen where it was because of external conditions to the business, nothing to do with the business. It was really what was happening in the world, and that effect on some of their other companies. So we were having Russia-Ukraine war going on. There was tensions in China and Taiwan with supply chain issues, rising cost of capital in North America and elsewhere. Lots of talk about we going into a recession, and all of these things that gave them concern about executing dollars, on new acquisitions versus making sure their house was in order on their existing companies and platforms. So I think they were starting to see, not as aggressive as of activity on some of their other companies, and just wanting to make sure that dollars were more so devoted to what they had under their tent right now, as opposed to bringing on new things. So it wasn't even I wouldn't say it was as much of a, no, we're not interested, as we're not ready right now, and we'd like to pause and reconsider in the future. But that future date was uncertain, and we didn't know if we were going to be waiting a month or 6 months or a year, or if it would ever come back around. So we had lots of conversations back and forth with them, and ultimately in I think it was October 2022, we decided to part ways, and we're going to have to consider other options. And so parted ways, mutually decided, and that just kind of felt like a punch to the gut, to be honest, of having to restart, because you went through a good process and everything was good, and you're doing everything that you think you're supposed to be doing, and then something happens outside of your control. So it was tough, but we basically sort of picked ourselves back up, and almost a year later, we talked about early 2022. Now we're in the holidays, and then early 2023, we started to re-engage of new party, and ultimately through that found the new who would eventually be the new buyer, and then we closed it in October 2023. So it was all almost exactly to a year later, where we ran through the process twice. So it was a lot of work, but very happy, I guess, in the end with the buyer. I think the buyer the second time around, by the way, ended up being a European buyer. So it's kind of funny having a North American M&A firm involved in what ended up being a European to European buyer-seller transaction. But yeah, it was a great fit in the end, and very happy buyer-seller with where it ended up.
Yeah, I want to get back to the ultimate buyer, but going back to the first time they told you, we got to put a pause on it. What was going through your mind, and how did you handle that? Because that was pretty much a year's worth of work that you're highest of highs and the lowest of lows, all in a matter of one conversation. Take us through how you handled that.
Yeah, it was it was a tough phone call, because I thought the call was just this is the buyer you're talking to every other day or every week as the file gets closer to the finish line, and I was expecting it to be called just another due diligence question or something like that come up, and then they hit you with that news. So I remember thinking, I'm really not looking forward to calling my client after that. So after I hung up the phone, I had to call our client right away and fill them in on what was going on. And fortunately, it's just they were shocked, like I was, but they took the news relatively well. They just that. I think that was one of the things we liked about the client. They were just always level-headed. Their approach was sort of, hey, listen, outside of our control. I think they were less emotional about it than I was. I was more worked up, and they were more, Jeff, it's okay. So it was kind of a funny dynamic, but no, they kind of just said, listen, hey, everything happens for a reason, and we'll get through it. And we'll find another, we'll start looking at other options. So very, I'd say they sort of helped me through that as well, and we're still motivated to keep it going, which was great.
Yeah, that's awesome, because it could go the other way, where you have a client who's very upset, and make it difficult to kind of re-engage and go through another process and find another buyer. So it sounds like, and I would imagine that was, I'm speculating, but I'm knowing you, I'm guessing it's the case that over the time that you spent with them over the last year, building that rapport, that trust, working with them, have all the conversations that they they had confidence in you and your team that, even though this is a big bump in the road, definitely a curveball that you weren't expecting, that you would get, another buyer, and it would inevitably, come to the conclusion that you both wanted it to. And so when that happened, did you guys go through and kind of reset everything, or was there stuff that you had already prepared, whether it was a target buyers list or the marketing materials or whatever? Because I would imagine you had to tell other buyers, we're not going with you, or this is off the market, we're in due diligence. But what did you have to do, and how did you guys, kind of re-energize the deal and go out to find another buyer?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we, when we first talked to parties and went out, there was multiple people interested in this, and so we had to tell people, thanks for your interest, but no, we're going with somebody else. So your natural starting point might be to, as one party drops off, go back to the number 2 or the number 3, and who else had interest there that you can talk to. And we had conversations with, that was kind of a first step we took, to have conversations with some parties that had interest before. But I've learned over the years, this business is all about timing, and, those parties had either moved on or timing wasn't quite right for them.
Yeah.
They might have said, check back with me next year, or just, not ready to make a quick decision now. So we, the story of how we kind of found the eventual buyer it's really a story of having good luck, I guess. And I wish more buyers could come across us like this, but I really have to credit my client on the second buyer more than I can credit myself. And the reason is they were, it was all sort of serendipitous how it happened. But in the fall after this happened, they were up at a trade show in their industry, and got introduced to a party, or a party had reached out to them, who was very interested in the technology that they had, and mentioned that they had an investor group who were considering building a thesis around a new platform in and around the technology and the equipment they were building. And they saw application for it in a few different industries, but were considering its use in healthcare or recycling or food. And food processing, where my client was more based in, was one of the thesis on this platform investment that they were building on. So they were actively going through a process of trying to sort of landscape the globe and say, who are companies who are industry leaders in this space that we should be talking to. And when they came across my client, really piqued their interest. So that's when my client kind of came back to me and said, listen, I don't know if this is capable buyer or qualified or anything, but let's talk to them and see where it goes. So they were based in Nordic Europe, and very quickly after meeting them, we realized these guys are the real deal. They're very capable. They weren't a new private equity type fund, so they did have other platforms and investments. Big, I would say, play on sustainability, investing in the future. So their mindset was more so looking at, the world, if it's going to be 10 billion people by 2050 or whatever, we're going to be feeding the world, and we're going to have to produce food more efficiently and more sustainable way, and, reduce yield and increase quality. And so everything that my client was doing in that space really ticked the boxes of what they were looking for as well. So really hit it off with them. And I remember flying over to Austria, and they were coming down and sitting down in the room with them. And when I got back to Canada, people asked how was my trip to Austria. I said, well, the inside of the hotel I was at was nice, because that's pretty much all I saw, because I went there and we sat in a room and we just hashed out for a full day, and then picked up the next morning how this could work, and sort of had a whiteboard, and just very cool experience actually, and not typical to how we'd be doing things. But we really, I remember being up with a whiteboard and chart, and just mapping out the deal, and just saying, here's very good, transparent, open, honest conversation between both groups, which I think set the stage very well from the start. But we really mapped out how that transaction could look, and benefits, talked openly about pros and cons from both sides, and left that left that meeting, and I remember looking at my client, and I said, I think this is it. I think these are the ones. Like this is it. Just it felt that good of a fit. So that was early in 2023, and then we had to hash out an offer to sort of formalize it coming out of that, and due diligence sort of over the summer, late spring, summer, and got it closed in the fall with that group. So it was good. I wish that was the first time around, not the second time around, but everything happens for a reason. I think, like my client told me, when things fell through, and it all worked out in the end.
And that's what you want as an M&A advisor, is you want the best deal possible for your client. And that doesn't always mean the first one. It doesn't always mean the highest dollar amount. There's a lot of other things that play into that. And it sounds like, especially when a client who wants to grow and is not looking to get out because they're retiring, they have to work with these individuals and to continue to grow the company. So for probably double the amount of time for you and them working out best case scenario, right?
Yeah, for sure. And what was interesting is you mentioned the price, and that's important, but it's not everything. And especially if you're staying on in ownership position, and this is more of a partnership with a new investor, then you want to be confident who you're going to the dance with is the party that's going to get you from A to B, in the best way possible. So that second exit, whatever that looks like, whenever that is that much better at the end. And one thing that was really interesting in this case for my client was also that this was a new platform. So it wasn't like you're coming on at one company at the end of a platform deal. It was really that since they were in the early stages of building this, they had more opportunity to help it grow and see the direction that it was going to go. So my client has ultimately moved up to be, sort of CEO of that platform group, as opposed to not just that company, and be a part of something that's going to be bigger, better, and continue to grow. So it was, for a whole lot of reasons, it was just attractive. And although the price was good, it was lots of other things beyond that as well.
Right. Well, and no, so you're a North American M&A firm. You had your client in Austria and your seller in Europe as well. Not a common mix, I don't imagine. But from that, being in a different country, let alone continent, what did you learn from this whole experience that really you could take to to the next one? Let's say your consulting referral source has another European-based company. Like, what did you learn during this process that'll help you in the next one?
Yeah, I think what was eye-opening to me was, like I mentioned before, that there's a lot of similarities, but there are some distinct differences to how deals, I would say, are done over there. From a technical perspective and different regulatory environments and so forth. And there's some things that I went through on that deal that I would take back and say, why isn't this a North American standard that we do things this way? So we there's a lot of deals, and I would say in North America, it's almost like a recipe for here's how you should do a deal. And you look at different thresholds for how purchase sale agreements can be negotiated and where commercially reasonable terms are. And I think my approach that I learned from that I'll take to other deals is, just because it's done one way all the time doesn't mean it's the right way to do it, or the way you have to do it. A couple examples that come to mind are on in European deals. This is getting in a bit of technical weeds here, but I remember one case where we're talking about liability caps and thresholds on the deal and the purchase and sale agreement, negotiating it. And I, of course, am wearing my North American hat, and I looked at North American deal studies of what regular thresholds and liability caps are. And to give you a data point, in the U.S., 97%, I think it is, of deal caps are set at under 22% of the purchase price, and 60% are under 10%. And there's virtually, in the deal studies I've looked at, There's almost no U.S. deals that were done in the last year or two in the deal studies I looked at, which are a couple thousand deals that had a cap of the full purchase price amount. But in Europe, that's still common practice that about a third of deals have liability caps that are up to the full purchase price, and about 15% have liability caps. Only 15% of liability caps under 10%, which is the North American norm. So as we're negotiating some of the technicalities of the share purchase agreement, I really had to look at there's a distinct difference in standards between some of those in Europe and North America. Same thing with things like material adverse change clauses. 98% of US deals have them. 13% of European deals have them. It's a distinct difference. There's around working capital, working capital. We talk all the time about issues and challenges with defining and setting working capital pegs. And one learning or experience that I had going through a European deal is in North America, almost all deals are under what's called a completion account method, or what's called a closed account method. We don't even call it that because it's so common that that's just the way it's done, which essentially at the simplest means, from a working capital standpoint, you're going to set a working capital target. At the planned closing date, you're going to have your estimation of what working capital actually is at that closing date, and have a true up that happens at that time. So let's say your working capital was $1 million and your estimated at closing is 1.1. Well, there might be $100,000 adjustment to the purchase price. And then at that point, it's just an estimate. And then there's a closing set of financial statements that's done at a period afterwards. So let's say 3 months after closing, final financial statements are reconciled, and there's another true up of working capital. So that's a method that we're used to as M&A advisors here, the completion account method in North America. In the European, though, I've come to learn that that's not the norm. What they use is something totally different called lockbox method. And sure, some people listening in may have heard that, but we really don't see it very often in North America. And without going into too much details, it could probably be a whole other call just on this subject, but lockbox really, the economic benefits and costs transfer to the buyer at the time of the lockbox date. So the lockbox date could be the last fiscal year end, or it could be the closing of the LOI. But at that lockbox date, any fluctuations in the working capital up or down are to the benefit or the cost of the buyer, and there's no need for purchase price adjustments post-closing. Now, not all European transactions are done that way, but it was really interesting to go through that and see, working capital wasn't an issue on that transaction at all because it was negotiated up front. And any changes, we're going to have an adjustment to the purchase price afterwards. So the issue wasn't, I find in North America, sometimes it's, that issue's kicked down the road a little bit and addressed later. Whereas this was an interesting way to structure a deal that was very different and really solved that issue in the case of that transaction. So just between, liability caps and material adverse change conditions and lockbox first completion, those are just a few examples to illustrate that there are some real technical differences as well that we learned in the structuring of deals between both, and how some of that might come back to North America. Something for me to watch now and know that those type of things can be applied on transactions where it may make sense.
Yeah, that's great insight. And is that something that you're going to take into your North American based deals and try to work towards, or kind of not go back to old ways, but like you said, you kind of wish some of these European deal structure elements, something were a common practice in North America? Is that kind of something you're going to try to do, or you just take it deal by deal?
Yeah, kind of deal by deal. I do think that the lockbox, for example, method with working capital has its applications here in North America. What it essentially means, if you do have to do more work up front pre-LOI and really doing diligence on the financials. But once you get comfortable with that, it really condenses the due diligence process post. LOI. So there may be cases, I think, where that's interesting and applicable for deals. I think it makes me question some of the thresholds and things used of, the studies we go to say, well, most US deals have this sort of cap or this sort of threshold or these baskets. And, okay, that's great that has been historical, but it doesn't mean that since that precedence was set, that has to be the way that it is. So just re-questioning, I guess, for clients, a different perspective on where that right balance of risk tolerance should be on a transaction. I think I always take the perspective too. It's deal by deal that if you get, a really good price for your business, then maybe you're okay to take on a bit more risk in some of the things. Whereas if you feel like you're crunched more on price, then maybe you want to get more favorable terms. So it's always a balancing act there as well. But yeah, I guess, Nick, to answer your question, I'd just take it kind of case by case, and just having the knowledge that there's different ways of doing things will make me question, I guess, scrutinize maybe a bit more on purchase and sale agreements when I see them come across.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, to recap real quick, you went through this transaction where you represented a European buyer or a seller who ended up selling to a European buyer. What is just high level, like I said, kind of go back, because every deal is going to be different, right? So you can't necessarily take the playbook for this deal in cross border and do it for the next one. But what are a couple of things that high level you're going to remember from this experience that will help you in that next European based transaction you might do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, we just talked about a little bit of it in terms of don't assume that the way things have always been done is the right way. And I find in Europe, and again, I'm only basing this off of this one experience, so I'm making some generalizations and don't know if all deals this way, but I found the priorities in dealing with a European entity were a bit different than a lot of my dealings with North American entities, that it was perhaps less scrutinizing on the historicals and more forward looking on what's to come. So it was not as maybe more conservative approach of, not having to dig into the financials and that hard sort of negotiating North American style of, trying to pick apart anything and negotiating on it. It was very level-headed, sort of respectful negotiations, a lot of talk throughout it about forward-looking as opposed to back-looking, and due diligence was more focused on the management team and HR and values and doing some ESG due diligence and stuff that. So the weighting of topics was a little bit different on this one. It was less on what I'm used to, which is there was still the tax due diligence and quality of earnings and financials, and those boxes needed to be ticked, but a more sort of friendly negotiation style, I would say, from this one experience anyway. So just a different approach and mindset deals maybe, and I think a lot of that was able to be the case because of the fit and the priority that we gave on not just worrying about the price, but worrying about the fit in this case between the parties. So reinforces the importance of, you're not just trying to find somebody at the best price. You gotta have the full package. You gotta have the price, but you have to have the terms and you have to have the fit, especially when you're being involved in ownership. It's the owner staying forward. So just a bit of a different perspective, I guess, on deals that we're working on now.
Yeah. Again, congratulations on closing that unique setup on a deal that you don't see a whole lot. So congratulations on closing that opportunity. Really
thank you, Nick.
We really appreciate you jumping on, joining me on the show. If anyone wants to learn more about you, Confederation M&A, how they can get a hold of you, where they can work with you, or find more information about the things that you're doing, where can our listeners find you?
Group.ca or .com is a great resource to just see our team page, and it has our contacts right on there. You can also find me, Jeff MacKenzie, on LinkedIn as well. But my website and bio and everything are on our website. So feel free to check us out. And we do have some content that you can subscribe to if you want to we don't spam you, but if you want to get on a newsletter or anything and hear about the deals we have on the go and stories about what we've been working on, feel free to check us out on our website or LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. And that is all we have for this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. One thing that'll help Jeff and myself out tremendously would be to like, share, comment on this episode, and send it to anybody who you feel might benefit from the content and the conversation that Jeff and I had today. Also, be sure to check out all of our episodes at cornerstoneia.com/podcast. We hope you found this conversation beneficial and you can have a couple of takeaways and find some assurances in if you're dealing with a cross-border deal that Jeff experienced, and hopefully you can adopt into what that might be for you and your clients. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care, everybody.